It all started with a tomato, just a harmless little plant in my front yard. But to Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, it was an illegal property value-destroying menace. One day I was minding my own business, watering my vegetables, when she marched up like a suburban drill sergeant, clipboard in hand. "You can't have those here," she declared. "Why not?" She gasped as if I'd just confessed to burying treasure in my lawn. "Because this is a neighborhood, not a farm." I laughed. He didn't. And that's when I realized, I wasn't just growing vegetables. I was growing a war. Hello beautiful peoples, where are you watching this video from? It was a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, the kind where people waved politely but mostly minded their own business. Yards were well kept, driveways were free of clutter, and the most scandalous thing that ever happened was Mr. Thompson's holiday lights staying up until March. Life was good. That is, until Karen decided it was her personal duty to enforce every real and imaginary rule of the HOA. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was a force of nature. The type of person who could turn a slight breeze into a full-blown hurricane of complaints. With her ever-present clipboard, pursed lips, and the unshakable belief that she alone understood the true spirit of the community, she roamed the sidewalks like a self-appointed sheriff. The first time she confronted me, it was over something ridiculous. A garden gnome near my front porch. I was watering my plants when I felt the weight of a stare. Turning around, I saw her standing there, arms crossed, mouth curled in disapproval. "That gnome," she said, pointing like it had personally offended her, "is not HOA approved." I blinked. "It's a decoration. It's an eyesore." She scribbled something down on her clipboard with the enthusiasm of a traffic cop handing out speeding tickets. "I'll be filing a complaint." I wanted to laugh. A grown woman, practically hyperventilating over a gnome. Instead, I shrugged it off, figuring she'd get bored and move on to her next victim. But Karen never got bored. Karen thrived on control. A week later, she was back, this time with a deeper grievance. "My vegetable garden. This is unacceptable," she declared, staring at my neat rows of tomatoes and peppers like they were a crime against humanity. I frowned. "What's unacceptable?" She gasped, as if the answer was obvious. "You can't have vegetables in your front yard." I glanced down at my plants. "Pretty sure I can." She clutched her clipboard tighter. "No, you can't. This is a neighborhood, not a farm." I raised an eyebrow. "Show me where it says that." Karen's eyes flickered just for a second. She hadn't expected me to challenge her. But she recovered quickly, adjusting her stance like a lawyer preparing for a big case. "The aesthetic standards of the HOA prohibit anything that disrupts the uniform appearance of the community." Vegetables disrupt the uniform appearance? They do here. It was then that I realized what I was dealing with. Karen wasn't just an HOA stickler. She was on a power trip. And she wasn't going to stop until she bent everyone to her ridiculous standards. I had two choices. Give in and let her dictate what I could grow in my own yard, or stand my ground and prepare for battle. I chose battle. The first violation notice arrived in my mailbox like a ransom letter. Folded neatly in an envelope stamped with the HOA's official seal, it listed my offense in bold, capitalized letters. Unauthorized vegetables. I read it twice just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Unauthorized vegetables? What did they think I was growing? Illegal contraband? Were my tomatoes part of some underground produce smuggling ring? Karen, of course, was already lurking nearby, arms crossed, waiting for a reaction. I could almost hear her thoughts. "This is it. This is the moment he breaks." I waved the paper at her. "Seriously?" She tilted her head in mock concern. "The rules are the rules." "What rules?" "There's nothing in the HOA guidelines about vegetable gardens." Her lips curled into a tight smile. "It falls under unsightly additions to front yards." I stared at her. "You think fresh vegetables are unsightly?" She sniffed. "They disrupt the uniform aesthetic." "Right. Because nothing ruins the look of a suburban street like a few homegrown bell peppers." I knew arguing wouldn't get me anywhere, so I shrugged and went back inside. But Karen wasn't finished. The next morning I found her on my lawn, measuring my plants with a ruler. I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand. "You okay there?" She straightened, clipboard in one hand, tape measure in the other. "Your plants exceed the acceptable height limit." I blinked. "That's not a thing." "It is now." I glanced toward my neighbor Tom, who was peeking over his fence, barely containing his laughter. He gave me a thumbs up. Good luck, buddy. Karen scribbled furiously on her clipboard. You'll be receiving a fine. For what? Non-compliance. I couldn't help it. I laughed. You're fining me, for vegetables? She nodded sharply. I suggest you remove them before it escalates further. Oh, it was escalating all right. But not the way she thought. Because if Karen wanted a battle, she was about to Gay wasn't about to let Karen win. But I also knew that direct confrontation would only fuel her HOA dictatorship. No, if I was going to fight back, I had to do it strategically. First, I checked the actual HOA rulebook. I spent an entire evening flipping through pages of tedious guidelines about mailbox heights, fence colors, and approved shades of beige for front doors. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say a single word about vegetable gardens. The next time I saw Karen, she was on the sidewalk, arms crossed like she was guarding Buckingham Palace. I smiled. Hey Karen. Quick question. Where exactly in the HOA rules does it say I can't have a vegetable garden? She faltered for a second. It's implied under aesthetic regulations. Oh, because I read the rulebook cover to cover last night. Funny thing, there's nothing about vegetables. Her nostrils flared slightly. The HOA board has the discretion to enforce community standards. Right, but only based on actual rules, not personal opinions. That was the first time I saw the tiniest flicker of doubt in Karen's eyes. She had been so used to everyone just rolling over that the idea of someone challenging her authority seemed to short-circuit her brain. But of course she wasn't going to back down. If anything, she doubled down. The next day I received another violation notice, this time for unauthorized landscaping modifications. Karen had officially upgraded my vegetable garden to a landscaping crime. Fine. If she wanted a game, I was going to play. I started by making small adjustments. I added tiny decorative signs next to each plant that read things like 100% HOA compliant shrub, certified non-threatening tomato, Karen safe lettuce. Then I got the neighbors involved. Tom next door, who had been secretly enjoying the drama, decided to plant his own vegetable garden. Then Lisa across the street. Within a week, half the block had suddenly developed a love for gardening. Karen was furious. You're all in violation, she shrieked at a group of us one afternoon. Tom shrugged. For what? There's no rule against it. Her eye twitched. It's ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. Lisa, watering her new row of basil, grinned. Looks pretty nice to me. Karen stomped away, muttering under her breath. I knew she wasn't done. She never gave up that easily. But I was ready for whatever came next. Word spread fast. What started as Karen's personal crusade against my vegetable garden had turned into a neighborhood-wide rebellion. It started small, just a few neighbors planting tomatoes and peppers in their front yards. But within days it became something bigger. People who had never even considered gardening were suddenly installing raised beds, hanging herb planters, and arranging decorative trellises. The quiet suburban street that Karen had worked so hard to keep uniform was now a lush, colorful paradise of homegrown produce. And Karen? She was losing her mind. This is anarchy, she ranted at the next HOA meeting, slamming a folder labeled neighborhood offenders onto the table. Our property values are plummeting. From the back of the room, Tom muttered, pretty sure fresh basil isn't causing a housing market crash, Karen. The HOA board, usually indifferent to minor disputes, had started to look increasingly exhausted by her constant complaints. Even they couldn't pretend that a few zucchini plants were the community's biggest crisis. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She doubled down. One morning I stepped outside to find her standing on my lawn, measuring my carrots with a ruler. I stared. Really? She huffed. These exceed the acceptable height for non-ornamental plants. I folded my arms. You just made that up. She ignored me and snapped a picture. You'll be receiving another notice. At this point, the entire neighborhood had started treating Karen like a local attraction. People casually watched from their porches, sipping coffee, waiting to see what ridiculous stunt she'd pull next. Then the real fun began. Tom started a secret neighborhood group chat titled Karen Watch 2025, where we documented her latest antics. Tom. She's on Lisa's porch inspecting her rosemary like it's a crime scene. Lisa. She just glared at my basil. I think she's planning something. Me. $5 says she calls the cops on my lettuce by the end of the week. Neighbor Bob. She just left a violation notice on my door for excessively decorative squash. I think I'm honored. The more ridiculous she got, the more the neighborhood united against her. And then finally she did it. She called 911. Over vegetables. It was a peaceful Saturday morning when the flashing red and blue lights pulled into my driveway. I had just stepped outside with my coffee when I saw them. Two confused-looking police officers stepping out of their cruiser. One holding a notepad, the other scanning my front yard like they were responding to a hostage situation. Behind them, standing with her arms crossed and a look of smug satisfaction, was Karen. I sighed. Let me guess. She called you? One of the officers nodded, clearly regretting whatever life choices had led him to this moment. We got a report of an illegal agricultural operation? I stared at him. You mean my tomatoes? Karen stepped forward before he could respond. This entire yard is a violation. He's growing vegetables in plain sight. It's against HOA regulations, it's lowering property values, and it's a public nuisance. The officer gave her a slow, measured look. Ma'am, is there any actual crime happening here? Karen stiffened. It's a violation of our community standards. The other officer pinched the bridge of his nose. That's not a police matter. Karen gasped as if they had just announced they were on my side. So you're just going to let him get away with this? The first officer turned to me. Sir, do you have any actual legal complaints against you? I shook my head. Nope. HOA doesn't have a single rule about vegetables. The second officer sighed and turned back to Karen. Ma'am, please stop calling emergency services for non-emergencies. Karen looked utterly betrayed. As if she had expected the police to slap handcuffs on me and haul me away for the heinous crime of growing cucumbers. This is outrageous, she huffed, storming off toward her house. I will be speaking to the HOA board about this. She was right about that last part. That Monday she marched into the HOA meeting with a binder full of photos, complaints, and what I could only assume was a personal manifesto against home gardening. What she didn't expect was that I had come prepared too. I stood up and calmly presented my own evidence. The actual HOA rulebook, proving there was no mention of vegetable gardens. Photos of Karen trespassing on my lawn to take measurements. Screenshots from neighbors showing her harassing them over their gardens. And of course, a lovely video of her calling 911 on a zucchini plant. The HOA board, exhausted and visibly done with her nonsense, didn't take long to deliberate. They ruled in my favor. But the real cherry on top? They hit Karen with multiple violation notices for trespassing on other people's properties, harassing homeowners, having unauthorized decorations in her own yard. Yes. It turned out that while she had spent all her time enforcing fake rules, she had been breaking real ones. Things like the 2-yard ornament limit. She had 3. The look on her face when she received her own violation notice was priceless. The meeting ended with a final ruling. Karen was officially banned from filing complaints for the next 6 months. The neighborhood celebrated that night. And in the ultimate poetic justice, every single house put up extra decorations, bright flowers, and, of course, more vegetable gardens. Karen didn't take her downfall gracefully. For the next few weeks, she walked around the neighborhood like a wounded general who had lost a war. Her clipboard disappeared. Her once frequent patrols became less enthusiastic. But the biggest change? She stopped talking to people altogether. At first she tried to fight back. She sent strongly worded emails to the HOA board, demanding they reconsider their ruling. She tried catching neighbors in driveways to rant about how we work destroying the neighborhood's reputation, but nobody was listening anymore. The power trip was over. And the best part? The neighborhood thrived without her interference. Tom installed an entire raised garden bed in his front yard. Lisa's basil and rosemary turned into an elaborate herb garden. Even Bob, the guy who used to barely mow his lawn, got in on the fun, planting some squash just to spite Karen. It was glorious. But the ultimate karma came a month later. One evening I found another notice in my mailbox. At first I thought Karen had found a loophole and was trying to find me again. But when I opened it I nearly choked on my drink. Karen had been fined by the HOA. For what? For having unauthorized yard decorations. Apparently someone had pointed out to the HOA that Karen had more than the allowed 2 decorative elements in her yard. A set of garden flamingos, a seasonal wreath, and a particularly hideous faux stone cherub put her in clear violation of the very same rules she had tried to weaponize against everyone else. The best part? She was forced to remove them, or face additional fines. The day she dragged her pink flamingos to the trash bin was the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal. After that, Karen faded into the background. She stopped showing up to HOA meetings. She no longer walked around with her clipboard. It was as if, without her self-appointed authority, she didn't know who she was anymore. The neighborhood, however, had never been better. The vegetable gardens thrived. The neighbors were closer than ever. And for the first time in years, we all enjoyed a peaceful, drama-free existence. Karen never apologized. Of course she didn't. But in the end she didn't have to. She lost. And the tomatoes won. Karen never moved away, but she might as well have. Without her clipboard and her constant barrage of complaints, she became just another neighbor. She still existed in the periphery, scowling from her window every time someone planted a new row of vegetables, but she no longer had any real power. The HOA had stripped her of her ability to file complaints for 6 months, and by the time she was allowed to again, nobody cared. The board had bigger things to deal with, and the neighborhood had moved on. And the gardens? They flourished. Tom's raised beds exploded with cucumbers and strawberries. Lisa started trading herbs with neighbors like some kind of suburban spice dealer. Even Bob, the least likely gardener of us all, managed to grow an impressive crop of pumpkins, though he claimed it was accidental. As for me, I expanded my garden. Not out of spite. Not even because I loved fresh tomatoes, which I absolutely did. But because it became something bigger. It wasn't just about vegetables anymore. It was about standing up to nonsense, about proving that ridiculous power trips don't win in the end. One evening as I watered my plants, I noticed Karen standing on her porch. For a moment I thought she might march over and start another fight. But she didn't. She just sighed, shook her head and walked back inside. And that's when I knew. The battle was over. The neighborhood was free. The grass grew a little greener. The vegetables thrived. And for the first time in a long time, we all learned how to Karen-proof our lives. A good garden, a little bit of patience and a whole lot of petty community solidarity.